building all these tools, and we're kidding ourselves thinking that people are actually using them. They're not. I mean, walk into any large company. Does any employee there tell you, "Oh man, I love our ERP system. I wish I could do more of that." Like nobody will tell you that. I mean, they like using like Facebook or WhatsApp. They like using texting. I mean, that's what they use, right? I mean, go where people are actually using it and not force them to change.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Girl Gone Crypto. Today I've got an awesome guest here with us. We've got Stephen Pu, the founder and CEO of Taraxa. So Stephen, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
It's great to be here, Leah.
So I'm excited to dive into everything Taraxa and what you guys are building and what you're doing. And before we jump in, you were telling me before we jumped on this call the kind of fun story behind the name. So let's kick off there. Why Taraxa and what does that mean?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when we're creating, Taraxa, obviously we were trying to build a decentralized protocol. And one of the things that we thought, be nice to create a very visualized imagery. So we thought, hey, dandelion seems a pretty interesting imagery because you have all these little, seeds that are flying around, and they look like nodes, and they're sort of spreading around, and they form like a network of dandelions later. And so really cool. So we took the Latin name for the most common dandelion is Taraxa officinale. So we just cut off like the parts that sounded weird and kept Taraxa, which sounded pretty cool to us at the time. So it is also reflected in our logo with all these little dots, right? So it's sort of like those seeds flying around. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's so fun. It's such a great visual. So So to kick off, let's just get a really high-level overview of Taraxa and what you guys do. Kind of the slogan, if you will, is tracking informal transactions to minimize confusion and disputes. So I'm excited to kind of dive into what exactly that all means. So give us the high level, and then we'll kind of go into it from there.
Yeah, sounds great. So that's exactly what we do. Yeah, we track informal transactional agreements and data to really minimize, confusion and disputes, right? So what does that really mean, right? Actually, the vast majority of the world's, data and transactional data specifically are very informal and unstructured, right? Just flying around. Whether they're generating by machines or people, they're sort of flying around in text, they're flying around in email, people call each other. If it's in machines, they're often uncollected and unverifiable. So all that data is sort of untapped, right? I mean, over 80% of the data is untapped, and we're not really making use of it. And because we're not effectively making use of it, and because there's so much of it, that kind of thing is really leading to a lot of confusion in businesses. People are always sort of thinking, hey, did we talk about this? Is that what we said? I don't remember talking about this. It's between people, or it's generated by machines or devices. People are always suspicious. Like, did someone tamper with this data? Is it real? Can we really agree on this? So, Taraxa, what we have built is that not only did we build the layer one infrastructure, but we also built the application platforms that sit on top, which interfaces with machines as well as people. So we're actually able to secure the data at the source and actually create, immutable audit logs to actually make sure that the data is trustworthy, because we're actually able to hold the committing entities, right, accountable. Like, you definitely said this. Don't tell me you didn't say it. Don't tell me you don't remember it. It happened right here. No one can mess with it. So holding people accountable and capturing the data at the source, that really is what makes this data trustworthy, and that makes it useful, right? So we're making all this unuseful data useful.
So I want to dig into how exactly that works, because you gave a few examples of like, hey, there was an email and then a phone call, and it's so funny because I'm like, yes, exactly. Sometimes I can't even remember for myself who all what is happening, keeping track of everything. So how does that actually work? Do I then, after I get off the phone call, have to go like log this data, or does it interact with apps that you're already using? Kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, so for people-generated data, right, one of our critical focus is that we don't want to make the user work too hard, because that's the whole point of, not being able to capture the data. Because the alternative is that if people don't mind working hard, and we know people do mind that, everyone's lazy, then we will all get on some nice piece of project management software, and everyone will only communicate through that following a strict process, and there will be no confusion, right? But the world doesn't
Perfect.
run. right? Yeah. So what happened is something very simple, right? For example, you and I are texting. I text you something. Hey, Leah, I owe you $10. I'll pay you back like next week, right?
Mm.
And then I would CC Marinate on that text, and then Marinate would just send back text to both you and me and say, hey, we got a agreement. Agree or do you agree or disagree? You click on agree or disagree. It jumps you a web app, and you're done. No
Mm.
registration, no downloading the app. If I actually gave you back the $10, you wouldn't even remember that we did this because it doesn't matter, right? Now, if there was some beef about it, then we go
Mm.
back and we say, hey, and you would say, hey, look, it's right here, right? And I say, I don't remember doing that. No, you agreed to this. Like, no,
Mm.
that's not what we meant. No, you clicked on yes on this, right? Well, I remember we said something before. No, these things are in the perfect order of what you said when. It's all ordered,
Mm.
it's all nice. So don't try to back out of this, right? So that's really like a simplified example. Now the problem that people really get into is really volume, right? If there's only like one or two of this like a week, no one needs tools like this, right?
Right.
But when volume really goes up, that's when you really run into huge problems, right? So
Mm.
some of the classic examples that we're seeing are in places like construction sites, supply chain management. We're also seeing this in marine maintenance. So imagine you're on a construction site and there's like 100 contractors, subcontractors working together. And there are like hundreds of these things happening every single day. Like, hey,
Right.
the blueprint needs to be verified. Hey, the material needs to change, the time needs to change. The carpenter is talking to the drywall guy. I mean, tons of these little informal transactions that are going on. And it's very easy. Like 2 days later, some guy say, I've already poured the concrete, the wall's built. The guy say, wait, do we agree to do that? Like, no, you gotta knock the wall down, right? Well,
Mm.
that's gonna cost $1,000. Well, who's gonna eat that? So you start getting into these problems, and that happens if you talk to anybody in construction all the time. That
Mm.
happens all the time, and they just accept it as this is just the cost of doing business, and it shouldn't be, right? It really should not be. Like I said, it's a matter of complexity, tons of stakeholders involved. It's a matter of volume, and once it gets to a certain threshold, the risk and cost just becomes, like a huge deal. In construction alone, in North America, every year people are spending over $24 billion a year to resolve these disputes, and that's an undercount because most of the time people don't want to go to court, right? They just sort of silently absorb it, like, you know what,
Right.
we're going to do more business later. I'm not going to make waves. I'll just eat it now and we'll figure
Mm.
something else later down the road, right? That kind of thing. So it introduces a lot of cost and risk really into like sort of just business or even everyday operations. Like I said, I mean, this happens for people who are doing peer-to-peer lending as well. I mean, this really is a
Mm.
problem for anyone who incurs a large volume of this. Even for people during the pandemic, I think people are, stay at home and their email volume goes way up, right? And of
Mhm.
course, not everyone is going to be like, hey, let's all get on this nice project management software. I mean, no one does that. No one does that. So instead of getting like 5 emails a day, now you're getting 50. And yeah, you lose track of things. Everyone
Mhm.
loses track of things, right? Is it there in the email? Yeah, it's there in the email, but these are sort of like unstructured conversations, right? Like,
Mm.
did I really mean what you mean? Did we walk away from this really agreeing on X? So it really is very difficult to really capture what people mean. There's no clarity, and it's very hard to hold people accountable, right? So that's really sort of like a people generated data problem, right?
Ah, this is so interesting. Like my mind is kind of spinning with potential use cases for this because it truly could be put into pretty much any business scenario because the base platform of how this works is just, oh, you CC marinate, right? And it's pretty
Exactly.
easy.
Yeah. And it has, I mean, the other half of it is sort of like not only does this work with people, it
Hmm.
also works with machines, right? I've always
Mm.
joked that, like Taraxa is very well prepared for the eventual apocalypse of machines taking over. It's like we're prepared for that one too, right? So, I mean, we've been working with these large automakers and asset managers in Japan.
Mm.
So in the case of cars, I mean, you're running into these very interesting use cases. So you think about for example, second car sales or even P2P car lending, right? How do you know what actually happened to the car, right? If I were buying a
Mm.
used car, the two things I care most about is mileage and accidents. I
Mm.
mean, really, those are the big things I care about, right? And what do I do? Why do I have to go to a dealer, and why do I have to pay $100 for this Carfax report? Well, because
Right.
I need someone to tell me what happened to the car, right?
Mm.
Now, there's no guarantee that any of this is accurate, right? Carfax is all self-reported data. The dealers, like, You don't know what the dealer's doing to you, right? And so what should happen is that, well, the car is generating all this data, right? So what you would do, and what we actually built is a piece of secure hardware. It's a finance-grade secure hardware with secure elements and write once microcontrollers on it with, basically tamper-proof business logic integrated into the car. And it captures odometer data, which tells you mileage.
Oh,
And it
wow.
also captures accelerometer data, which, in large collisions, it will capture that data. So at the same time, it's uploading this data, it's hashing the historical data into chunks and signing them, anchoring them into the blockchain. So there's an audit trail. So you can prove two things. Data definitely came from the car, right?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the data was not tampered with after it was collected. So if you and I were selling, if I were selling you my car, all I got to do is like show you this data and be like, hey, look, it shows you the entire history of the car, right? I mean, if I were relying, if you were relying on Carfax, I could have ran the car into a telephone pole and I not reported it to the insurance company. You would not know about it.
It's
Right?
true.
Here, you wouldn't know about it because there's no way of me getting out of that data getting reported, right? So, so that tells you, and that's an example of an independently verifiable, an independently verifiable source of data, and you don't need a third party to come in and say, I approve of this data. No, there's no need for that, right? So you cut out the middleman. You don't have to pay $100 for the Carfax report. You don't need to be ripped off by the dealer, and people can just do whatever they want, right? I mean, this is really, really, really great, and that really goes to this larger problem of what I was thinking about when we started out Taraxa is, people go through a lot of length to actually verify information, right? And that's really what slows everyone down, right? As projects become more complex, as companies become bigger, organizations become bigger, people start expending like geometrically more and more time and effort to validate data, to validate information that they're getting from people, right? So, and that's why I was I started a few startups before, and then I was also in strategy consulting. I was an associate partner at Monitor Deloitte, working on their digital strategy division, and why do large companies like suck, right? I mean, they don't suck because they're stupid. No, they have brilliant people. They don't suck because they lack money. They have tons of money. They have tons of resources, commercial, whatever. So why are they so bad at reacting to market changes? Because they're slow, right? And the reason why they're slow is because they're big, right? They have a big operation, lots of bureaucracy, layers and layers and layers, and they interact with other big companies, who are also slow, and everybody's slow. No wonder they miss opportunities, right? So human beings, as human beings, we don't scale very well, right? And that a huge chunk of that problem is really caused by this. People have to constantly validate this information, right? You have to constantly validate it. So if you can take that out and have information just being independently trustworthy, I mean, imagine how quickly we can scale. Right. So yeah, I mean, that's really what's so exciting about what we're doing. And what's frustrating to me is just like, this is also another reason why we started Taraxa, is that nobody's really looking at this problem. You know what I mean? It's, typically when people think about, well, how do you verify information? Well, step number one, get on some ERP platform. Everyone has to enter, forms and data. Of course, that's the only way to do it, right? And second of all, put it down some process, get some auditors to come in, get some lawyers involved, make sure it's trustworthy. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so all very expensive, all very slow, right? And that's tradition. And then that consistently misses, right? This 80% of data that is they just resist being structured, resist being captured, and resist being just like nice and, formatted. And that data is getting bigger and bigger, right? I mean, every single industry in the world is moving faster, it needs to be cheaper, it needs to be better. Everyone's under lots of time pressure and cost pressure to actually perform. So people don't have the time to do all this work of nice work. This problem 20, 30 years ago, it also exists, not that big of an issue. Right. Today, huge issue, because everything needs to move so much faster, right? So people are not really looking at this problem and addressing it in the right way. They're just all thinking this other way, which is, well, let me create another app for this problem. Well, guess what? You're just going to one more app people are not going to use, And so it's really frustrating. I mean, like, you get into any one of these industries, you get into the construction industry. Yep. Is it true that the construction industry has no apps? No, they have tons of apps, right? Like, you have Procore, $5 billion company. You have like Building Connected, PlanGrid, all sold for Autodesk for almost $1 billion. great piece of software. They're great. They're very useful.
Mm-hmm.
People don't use it. I'll talk to these contractors. And I'm like, why don't you guys just use Procore? They're like, yeah, if I can get people to use it, it's great. But they don't use it. They just call me and text me. I mean, I can't force them. They don't work for me, right? They're my partners. I can't force them to use it. And that's what happens. You have, this, we're creating tons of tools, but we're not really addressing the real problem. And this is the problem that we're going after. And I think that's just so exciting because it's a wide space that somehow this entire world is sort of missing. They're not really targeting.
No, this is really, I'm getting really excited talking to you. This is really interesting, especially hearing you talk about just kind of some of these inefficiencies that happen in these bigger companies. So I came from the corporate world before working, here in crypto, and it was such a pain to use this like really old traditional like CRM. It was like, oh, you had a phone call. Now go write down everything. Oh, there's an email. Go log and enter it. And it seems like this would really save a lot of time and would increase quite a bit of efficiency within even those big companies, or really any company, because the time spent, they're trying to capture that data, but it's forced. No one likes it. It's annoying for everyone involved, you know?
That's exactly right. I mean, I want to interject something. I mean, because I was doing all these projects for these Fortune 100 companies. I've had so many situations in which I walk into a room and then like the CIO would just right away tell me, look, the data in our ERP system, the SAP system, ignore that. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, it's all fake. I'm like, how is that? Like, why is it fake, right? Like, because they're like, look, nobody likes to enter data. So you know what they do? Like every Friday, the sales team just comes in, enter some, crap into the database because that's part of their KPI. They got to enter something. So they enter something. And then when the managers challenge them, they're like, look, man, you want me to waste my time entering data? You want me to be out there making sales? And yes, I want you to be out there making sales. I screw the data. So every single time we deploy these projects, and it boggles the mind. It's like, why don't you guys have better planning? You have all this data. Well, data's fake. It's not trustworthy because people hate entering it, right? Exactly like what you said. No one likes to do that. So once again, we're building all these tools and we're kidding ourselves thinking that people are actually using them. They're not. I mean, walking to any large company, does any employee there tell you, oh man, I love our ERP system. I wish I could do more of that. Like nobody would tell you that. I mean, they like using like Facebook or WhatsApp. They like using texting. I mean, that's what they use, right? I mean, go where people are actually using it and not force them to change.
So I know that we're kind of coming a little close on our time. It's just, this has been so exciting just to like dig into the overall vision of what's happening. But before I let you go, I do want to just dig a little bit more into the tech side of this. And so, you'd mentioned that things are logged in the blockchain. I saw on your website, you guys are using something called DAG technology. Can you kind of just give us a quick overview of what the blockchain kind of consensus mechanism looks like, what you guys are using, and what the tech that powers this looks like?
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk about from two perspectives, right? First perspective is why is the tech sort of innately superior? And the second is how does the tech actually support our use cases? Because you never build tech in isolation. It always has to solve some specific problem. So first of all, the tech is just sort of very interesting. So we use block DAG because single chain topologies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, single chain, they cannot increase their throughput without sacrificing security or decentralization. Right. The only way they can do that is sharding, right? We see a lot of projects that do sharding. Sharding adds like tenfold complexity, much bigger attack surface. It has its own set of problems. So block DAG, what it does that is actually able to allow multiple blocks, right? It's a very inclusive protocol. Multiple blocks we propose at any given moment. So the way that it works, I won't go into details, but fundamentally what it does is that it increases throughput without having to sacrifice security or decentralization. So it's a very, very interesting technology. The second thing that we think was very interesting is that in addition to that, we are adding a parallel asynchronous PBFT process that actually finalizes portions of the DAG periodically, right? And the reason why that's very important is because we started this project by looking at why our existing system is slow, right? So one of the reasons that these, for example, Ethereum is slow is because it has probabilistic finality, which means that there's always the risk of state reversion. Like, whoops, built on the wrong block. Let's change that, to a different block, right? So when that happens, you run into problems, and that's why they're forced to actually go through this Merkle tree structure every single time they do read, write, and execute, which slows everything exponentially down, right? Because we have no risk of reversion. We can actually just hit the database directly, and we increase that by thousandfold, like sort of a speed, and that's because we have true finality in the system. So we have extremely fast execution speed. And the third thing is that we replace this very energy wasting proof of work
Right.
with something called verifiable delay function coupled with verifiable random function. And the idea is that proof of work is really great. It gives you fair, true random delay, right? That's what proof of work does. Except it can be parallelized, and there's an arms race, and people consume tons of energy. Now, VDF and VRF gives you the same fair random delay without the Earth destroying energy burn, right? So that's also a very interesting innovation I think we've introduced into our network. So these are some of the core sort of fundamental technical innovations and features. Now, well, why do they matter, right? Why do they matter for the use cases that we're doing? Well, the first thing is that the audit logging process is really business logic, right? Most blockchains I think out there today they're just built to send coins around, right? They're sort of a coin chains, right? So we're much more focused on business logic. So this is why being able to actually have true finality, having and having a drastically thousandfold increase in our execution speed is very, very important, right? Because we're processing business logic. The second thing is that the true finality is very important because, the audit log, one of the very important aspects of the audit log is who said what when, right? So the when part of it is very important. The order of things happening is very important. And so we can't really have like these agreements or these audit logs being out of order and suddenly, order change, right? So you got to have true finality, zero risk of reordering, right? And the third thing that's very, very interesting is that audit logging are sort of these stateless transactions in that each audit log does not really impact anything that comes before, does not depend on anything that comes before, and has no impact on anything that comes after. So we're actually able to do speculative execution. We can actually start executing, processing these transactions before they're even finalized with very minimal risk of conflict. So there are all these unique features that we've built in order to serve our use case. And we're a big believer of that, right? Technology is built to solve problems. We're not sitting here building a layer one, be like, hey, throw it out to the world. Everyone will just come, like build it and they'll come. No, and that never happens. Right? They're not going to come, right? So we're out there actively soliciting adoption, and we're very purposely building our layer one technology to actually serve the use cases that we're seeing in the applications.
Awesome. Well, Stephen, it has been great to get to chat with you and just kind of get this high level overview of what you guys are building. I'm super excited to kind of follow along and watch you guys grow. And maybe we'll have to have you on again down the line for a follow up. But I'll go ahead and put the links below so everyone can check them out. But where should people go next if they want to keep checking out Taraxa and learn more about you guys?
Yeah, you can just come to our website, taraxa.io, and that's where you can learn a lot about our project. You can check us out on Twitter, at Taraxa_project. That's all the latest and greatest that's happening with our project. So
awesome. Well, thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you again, Stephen, so much for taking the time to come on the show. It's been really great to chat with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure chatting with you too, Leah.